All right, so this is just going to be a review or introduction into the common iterator methods on arrays. So we're going to talk about forEach, map, filter, findIndex, sum, and every. And just as a heads up, these are going to be the three that we're going to probably use the most. Find might be also used quite a bit, but these ones are a little less common. But essentially all of these methods are called on in an array, and they have the ability, these are all functions that take a function as a parameter, and then they're able to go through each thing, so they iterate through each thing in an array and perform that function that you give it. So they all do that. And they differ in what they return and how they behave. But none of these actually change the original array that called that method. So it leaves the array that called it unchanged. And if it returns something, it's going to be something new. All right. So let's go through forEach. So forEach is the simplest one. It just goes through each thing and performs the function that we give it. So let's say we have an array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is an array, and we can call the forEach method. And then for this, we're going to pass it a function. Now this right here in JavaScript is an anonymous function. It just means it doesn't have a name, but that is a function. But we do need to define a parameter to kind of hold the item that we're iterating over. In this case, it would be a number. So I could say something like num. And then here we could just console.log num. Just run this up in the terminal. And that just goes through each thing, and it calls my function. You know, I could do other stuff in here. I could say like num equals or num plus equals 5. If I wanted to add 5 to each of my numbers, then we just add 5. Or I could do something like this. Maybe throw in some logic here. This is just a function, so I could say if num, mod 2 equals 0, console.log even, else console.log odd. So these methods just give me a way to iterate over arrays, and then I can pass specific functions telling it what I want to do. So that they're very useful in that regard. And so forEach doesn't return, forEach returns undefined. I'm going to say return val. You can just put this out after. Console.log. Yeah. So this forEach, it doesn't really return anything. It just returns undefined. So sometimes we want these methods to return some stuff. For example, let's look at map. So map does something very similar that forEach does. It goes through each thing in the array, performs a function on it, but whatever that function returns, it's going to push into this new array that it's creating. And then at the end of this function, it's going to return that new array. So let's look at what that means. So let's come through so I'm just going to comment this out so it doesn't run. Let's come through an array of numbers, and let's now call the map. So once again, this just takes a function. So we're going to go through each number and perform a function. And this is just the function we're passing it. But this one needs to return a value. So this is this return value of this function. It's going to go through each thing and then return this into the new array. So I could do number times 2. Now if I run this, nothing happens because I really haven't done anything with this, the return value of the map function. So there's really two return values here. There's the return value of this inner anonymous function, but then there's also the return value of the map function. And that is going to return a new array with all the values of this, what this function returns. So it's kind of easier to see in an example. So let's throw that into a variable. Let's call this let doubled. Then we can console.log doubled. And there we go. And there's our array of doubled numbers. And we can see, well, let's do this. Let's store our, let's say original array. Let's actually store this into a variable and then call it. So I'm just, instead of just calling this directly, I'm just storing it to a variable, original array, and then I'm going to call the map function on that. So it's the exact same thing. But we can see when I run this time, my original array here, it's not changed. The thing that called the method on it is not changed. So this returns a new array. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and delete. Well, let's comment this out and let's do another example of map. So another use case of map is, let's say we have some data. We have some like users data. And for now, we'll just keep this simple. We'll say this is like a list of strings. Now something we might want to do is we might want to take this data and convert it to HTML. And with React, we're going to want to take this data and convert it to what's called JSX. Let's just kind of think about this in HTML terms. I could say I could then create another variable like HTML array or HTML users, let's just call them that. And I'm going to take my users and I'm going to map over them. I'm going to go through each user. We're just going to return, maybe we want them in some HTML. So I can take this, hard data structure and convert it into something a little more user-friendly like HTML. And now I can console.log HTML users. And there we go. That creates the new array. Instead of just being these strings, well, now they have this HTML. I could also, it doesn't have to be the same type. Maybe I switch these to, an object. So I could go from one type of data, so I could go from an array of strings and maybe convert that to an array of objects. So now I have an array of objects with the key name, and then the value is going to be their name. So there's some examples on maps. Maps very good when you want to go through each item and maybe update it or get back a new kind of data. So one's going to be very common when we get to React. It's probably going to be the most used one. Let's look at filter. So filter, and I'm going to say this about the rest of these functions as well, minus reduce. We're going to skip reduce this time, but filter, find index, every, and sum. So these all go through our array, and they perform a function on each item. Now this function is going to return a Boolean. And so let's look at what this is with filter. So each function is going to return a Boolean. With filter, if that function returns true, then we're going to keep that in, and we're going to start collecting these in a new array. So let's say I have an array of numbers and I just want to grab all the even numbers. So once again, I can go through each number. So this function, I just need it, this function right here, I need this function to return a Boolean. And if it returns true, it's going to keep it in the new array. So this one can return, if we wanted to keep all the even numbers, just num mod 2 equals 0. That's how we can figure out if a number's even. We can then store this into a variable. Evens. And there we go. There's our array of even numbers. I could see also like, is a number greater than 4? That would collect all of my numbers that are greater than 4. In this case, it's just one number. But notice this is still coming back as in an array. If I do greater than 6, it's going to return back an empty array. So this always returns in an array of the things that return true. With all of these methods, we can do array of objects, and we're going to probably see a lot of that once we get to React. So let's say we want to grab all the people over 21, and we have an array of objects. So they're like a name, Tony, and then they have an age. We have another one, name, Sally. And let's do one more. So a lot of the time we'll have, this, array of objects. Let's just call this, let's actually store these to a variable. Let's call these let people. Let's have a people array. And then I can come down here and I can grab all the people over 21 by using my filter function. So let's go through each person and just return, well, is the person.age greater than 21? Then we can go ahead and log that. Little logic error, greater or equal to 21. I wanted to grab if you're 21 or older. So we grab Tony and we grab Bob. And notice Sally, she's 20, she's not included. And I could then take this over 21. And this isn't an array, and then I can map over this and go through each person again. Maybe this time I want to return some JSX. So I can go through my person, they all have a name. And then I can create just a list of people in HTML form. So I can filter all of my people, grab all the ones that are over 21, and then I can map over those people who are over 21 and, maybe go ahead and throw this in some HTML. So now I just have Tony and Bob. Now I can also chain these together. So I'm just going to copy this people.filter, and then I'm going to copy this map function, and I'm going to chain these together. I'm going to comment this out. Let's just call this let chained. Call this chain demo. Okay, so I'm getting my people, and then I'm calling the dot filter method. So this right here, when I look at this is going to return in an array. But we don't assign it to change demo because then we call the dot map function on this array. See, this right here is an array of data. That is an array of our filtered people. Then we call the dot map function on that filtered array. And then that is going to be converted and stored to this chain demo. So I'll just make this a little different so we can see this. So now when I run this, I first filter through my people, and then I map over them and convert the HTML. So we can chain these methods together. All right. Let's go to find, and I'm once again, I'm going to use this people array here. So find is going to do the same thing that filter does, where it goes through and we give it a function that returns true or false. The difference between find is it's going to return the first thing it finds. So let's call find on this, people.find. And you know what, let's actually just give it this over 21. Let's kind of do what we did last time. So let's go through each person. Let's create that anonymous function. Now this is going to be not in an array. It's going to be whatever type of data is in the array. So in this case, it's going to be an object. So we can console.log person. Now the first person in my array who is over 20 or who is 21 or older is Tony. So it finds the first thing and then it just stops. So Bob's never going to get found because Tony's found before Tony. This one can be good when you have IDs. You know, maybe you want to find the particular, because IDs are unique when they come back from a database. So maybe you want to find a particular, like you have a user's ID and you want to find that user in your array. Well, you can use the ID. So I can go through each of my people and see, hey, where does, I want to find the person with ID 2. So then we can go through our array and then find that one person. Cool. Find, I'm just going to copy and paste this for our find index. Oh wait, let me show one more thing, sorry. Let's say we don't have, like I'm trying to find a person with ID 4, which we do not have. If that happens, if we do not find it, we return undefined. So if it's not in the array, or if it doesn't, if all of our things are returning false, then we return undefined. So let's look at findIndex. findIndex is very similar, except it just returns the index of the person. So if you want to grab the index in the array, then you can use the findIndex method. So if I'm looking for the person with the ID of 2, that's Sally, she's going to have the index of 1 because that's her position in that array. So we run that, there's my 1. And for this one, if we don't find something, it's going to return -1. So that means if it's -1 is returned, it means we didn't find a match. So find and findIndex are very similar. Find returns the actual thing, findIndex returns the index. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to comment those out. Let's just go through every. So every and some, they're a little less common, but we can go through with every, and this every is going to be like, it's going to return a Boolean. It's going to return true or false. It's going to return true if all of the conditions match, and false if they don't. All over 18. So I want to see if everyone in my array is over the age of 18. Now all of them they all are over 18. So this should return true. So let's go ahead and check that out. That's true. Now if I did this all over 21, well, that's going to return false because Sally is not over 21. So everyone in my array is not over the age of 21. And then I'm going to copy this again. Let's go to sum. Sum is very much like every, but only one has to return true for this to return true or false. So our sum of my people over 18, let's just change these variables so they're a little more clear. Well, yeah, they're all over 18, so that is true. You can just console.log that. We have an error. Let's see, all over 18. Oh, up those logs there. All right. So sum over 18, well, they all are over 18, but that means some of them aren't as well. Are some of them over 21? Well, let's even do 22. Because Bob is the only one that's over the age of 22. But this is still going to be returned true because only one of them needs to return true. So that's true. So those are our basic iterator methods. Like I said, the sum and every, we don't use these too much. The find and the find can be useful when you want to find one thing in an array and use that. But really what we're going to be using a lot of is forEach, map, and filter. Those are our very common ones. There's one more that I'm going to do a separate video on just because it's a little more complicated, and that is the reduce method. Now reduce is really powerful. We can do a lot of things with reduce, and there's a lot of use cases for it. But you can get pretty far along with just these four. But we'll look at reduce later, and yeah, I think that's good for now. All right, thank you.